At Sunday dinner, my niece rolled her eyes and said, "Mom says you're too poor for real jewelry." Then she grabbed my necklace, the one given by Grandma, and snapped it in half while everyone laughed. 2 years of funding their golden daughter ended that evening. I always knew Rachel had a problem with me, but I never thought she'd train her daughter to treat me like dirt. I should have seen it coming. There were signs, little jabs at family gatherings, my name being left off thank you cards, my offers to help getting brushed aside with a fake smile. But it wasn't until that Sunday dinner that everything clicked. And once it did, I made sure none of them would forget it. Rachel is my sister. My only sister. Growing up, we weren't especially close, but I always thought blood meant something. I let a lot slide over the years. Her passive-aggressive comments, the way she'd twist every act of kindness into something I apparently did for attention. I kept helping anyway, because that's how I was raised. Help family even when they don't help you back. Especially then. Haley, her daughter, is 21. A golden girl in Rachel's eyes, practically worshipped since birth. No rules ever applied to her. If she got in trouble, it was someone else's fault. If she failed a class, the teacher was out to get her. I used to think she was just a spoiled kid who'd eventually grow out of it. I realize now that you don't grow out of something when your mother rewards you for it. 2 years ago, Haley announced she couldn't live under her parents' roof anymore. Claimed she needed space for her mental health. Rachel called me, nearly in tears, said they couldn't afford to get her a place. Not with Thomas, Rachel's husband, barely working since his accident. I said I'd help. I didn't ask questions. I covered the rent. Quietly. Every month. For 2 years. I paid because I thought it mattered. Because I believed giving Haley stability would help her turn into a better person. She never said thank you once. That Sunday, everything felt off the second I walked in. Haley gave me that smug little look. Rachel didn't even bother to greet me, and Thomas, well, he never really talks anymore. He mostly stays quiet in the corner like he's just trying to make it to the end of the day without more chaos. I wore Grandma Carol's necklace like I always did to these things. A small gold chain with a green stone. Not worth much, but it was the only thing of sentimental value I had left. Grandma had given it to me when I was 13, said she wanted me to have something that felt like hers. She picked me, not Rachel. Halfway through dinner, with everyone halfway through pretending we were still a normal family, Haley suddenly leaned back in her chair, chewed her food like she was bored, and said, loud, clear, "Mom says you're too poor for real jewelry." I didn't react. I thought maybe I misheard. Then she reached across the table, grabbed the necklace around my neck, and snapped it. Just like that. The chain split, the emerald dropped into my mashed potatoes, and Haley sat back like she just swatted a fly. Rachel laughed. Actually laughed. Not nervously, not confused, but like it was a punchline they'd rehearsed. Even Thomas didn't speak. He just kept his eyes down. I stood up. Quietly. Picked the broken chain from my plate and folded it into my palm. I left without another word. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked out of that house and into the start of something I should have done a long time ago. The next morning, I called Haley's landlord. Told him September would be the last rent payment he'd ever get from me. I said she had 30 days. No exceptions. I didn't tell them. Not yet. I wanted them to find out the same way they always treated me, like an afterthought. Like I didn't matter. But that was only the beginning. I didn't say a word to them after that dinner. I didn't warn anyone. I didn't drop hints. I just let the payment quietly vanish like all the respect they'd failed to show me. September came and went, and so did the rent. October 1st, I knew the silence would end. That's the day everything would start unraveling. It started just before noon. I was at work, sipping cold coffee and trying to get through my emails when my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. I didn't pick up. Then Haley tried. Then Rachel again. 5 calls in 10 minutes. I turned the phone over and let it ring until it stopped. The first text was polite. Probably her attempt at diplomacy. "Hi, not sure if you forgot or if there was a mix-up, but Haley's landlord says rent didn't come in this month. Can you check?" Then came the second 5 minutes later. "Haley's freaking out. She got a warning notice. This is really serious." Then the third. "Emily, this isn't funny. What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I wanted the silence to stretch. Let them sit in the confusion for a bit. Let them wonder. The next day she called again. This time twice from her number and once from Thomas's. That's the one I answered. I don't know why. Maybe because I knew it would rattle her more if I picked up when she wasn't in control of the call. She didn't even try to be civil. "So you're seriously punishing her? Over what? A stupid joke. That's low even for you." I let her talk. She kept going. Said Haley was devastated, humiliated, and didn't know what to do. She said the landlord was threatening eviction and that I was making Rachel look like a bad mother in front of her own daughter. Then she said the thing that made me go cold. "You're blowing this out of proportion because you're jealous." I could have lost it. I really could have, but I didn't. I reminded her, slowly, that I'd been covering her daughter's rent for 2 years. That I'd paid the deposit, paid the internet, helped with furniture. That I'd given her kid the independence she bragged about to everyone, even though she never earned it. I reminded her that when Haley snapped our grandmother's necklace and threw a verbal slap across the dinner table, they all laughed. Not one of them stood up for me. Not even Rachel. There was a silence after that. The kind that usually comes right before people start to lie to themselves. She started saying it wasn't that serious, that Haley was just being dramatic, and didn't mean it. That's when I told her, I'm done. It's not my problem anymore. She tried to backtrack, told me Haley would apologize. That they could make it right. But I already knew they wouldn't. They were only panicking because they lost something they never appreciated. By the end of the week, Haley was officially out. The landlord, a man named Alan I'd dealt with directly before, called me himself. He wasn't unkind. He said he didn't want to evict a young girl, but rent was rent. She hadn't paid. And she wasn't answering his calls. He wanted to confirm I wouldn't be stepping in. I said no. Plain and simple. A few days later, the Instagram stories changed. The city selfies and brunch pics disappeared. Suddenly Haley was back in her childhood bedroom, posting filtered photos of her cat and pretending nothing had changed. But I knew it had. So did she. Rachel texted me again, one last time. Hope you're happy. She has nowhere to go now. And no money. You did this. Well, they did this. And I hadn't even started yet. 2 weeks after Haley was shoved back into her pink childhood bedroom, I started hearing whispers. Not from Rachel directly, she hadn't dared contact me since the rent stopped, but from Jenna, our cousin who worked part-time with Rachel at the local community center. Jenna always had a talent for being where she shouldn't be, hearing what no one wanted her to, then passing it along with zero shame. Apparently, the Haley situation had turned into a full-blown soap opera. The minute she moved back home, things got loud. Screaming matches at night. Doors slamming. Haley calling Rachel controlling. Rachel calling Haley ungrateful. One night, she reportedly told Haley she should have just moved in with her precious Aunt Emily, if she liked being a victim so much. Haley fired back that at least I had a job. Thomas, unsurprisingly, said nothing. That man had been silent so long I'm not even sure he remembered how to speak unless football was on. Haley had tried one last thing before reality really sank in. She went to her landlord, the same one I'd spoken to, and told him I must have made a mistake. That I'd definitely be covering October. She even spun some story about me being forgetful or overwhelmed, and that I'd been under a lot of pressure lately. That's what she told him. About me. After everything. He wasn't buying it. Not after I'd been the most consistent payer he'd ever had. He showed her the cancellation notice. Told her the lease wasn't just unpaid, it was done. The locks would be changed. Jenna said Haley came home with 3 trash bags and a cracked iPhone screen. No apartment. No money. No clue. That's when I made my second move. What Rachel didn't know, or maybe just never thought about, was that for the past 2 years, I'd also been quietly covering the last of their car loan payments. It was their second vehicle, not a fancy one, but it had gotten Thomas to his medical appointments and helped Rachel get to her part-time shifts. When his disability checks weren't cutting it and they were months behind, I stepped in. Set up monthly transfers. No one asked. No one thanked me. But I did it anyway. And now I was done. I canceled the autopay in late October. Didn't say a word. Waited. A month later, Jenna told me Rachel had gotten a notice in the mail. A missed payment warning followed by a final notice of default. The car was on the verge of repossession and they were clueless. Rachel apparently stormed through the house that night like a hurricane, yelling about financial sabotage and blaming Thomas for not catching it. She even blamed him for not keeping Emily happy, whatever that was supposed to mean. The next morning I got the text. Emily, we really need to talk. This isn't about Haley anymore. You can't take the car away from us. That's just cruel. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Another week passed. And then just like that, the car was gone. Repo team came early in the morning. Neighbors saw. Rachel came outside in her bathrobe, screaming at the guy who shrugged and pointed to the paperwork. Haley filmed it, like it was some kind of injustice, and posted a half-rant online about how people will smile in your face and ruin your life behind your back. The comments weren't kind. Turns out some people remembered me covering her tuition, or at least trying to. A few of our distant cousins chimed in and said things I couldn't have scripted better myself. Rachel's pride took a hit, but it was nothing compared to what was coming next. Because now she wasn't just dealing with a humiliated daughter and no car. Now the bills were piling up. The furnace was making noises. And their savings? Practically non-existent. That's when people started calling me. quietly, one by one. Aunts, family friends, even Thomas's brother, who never liked Rachel, called to ask me what happened. And for the first time I told the truth. Just facts. Clean. I told them about the rent, the necklace, the laughter. I told them everything. And almost every single one of them said the same thing. You did more than enough, Emily. But I still wasn't finished. Because what they didn't know, what Rachel couldn't possibly have guessed, was that there was one more thing left that she thought she still had control over. And I was about to take that too. By November, the damage was visible. The car was gone. The fights between Rachel and Haley had become so frequent that even Jenna stopped trying to listen in. I heard Haley had started sleeping until noon and avoiding everyone, only coming out of her room to microwave leftovers and argue about Wi-Fi speed. Rachel, meanwhile, was bouncing between rage and denial. Every time I thought it would quiet down, someone else would call me, an aunt, a cousin, a neighbor, all whispering some new fallout. And yet, through it all, Rachel still thought she had some ground to stand on. I hadn't spoken to her in weeks, but she started sending out signals through mutual friends. She told Jenna that Thomas was suffering without the car, that Haley might drop out of her online classes again, that things were reaching a breaking point. And finally, one message filtered its way back to me that made me pause. She says if she had to, she'd go to Grandma's lawyer and contest the will. That got my attention. Now let me explain something most of the family didn't know, and what Rachel clearly had forgotten. When Grandma Carol passed away, she didn't leave much behind. A few heirlooms, some savings, and a modest house that had already been sold to cover medical bills. But she did have one thing, a trust account. It wasn't big. Low 6 figures. The catch was it wasn't meant for just anyone. It had conditions. Grandma left the decision in my hands. She gave me the authority to distribute it or not, to family members as needed. Not equally, not automatically. As needed. Because she trusted me. Not Rachel. Not anyone else. The only person who knew this besides me and the lawyer was Thomas. Back when he got injured, I used part of the trust to cover his out-of-pocket medical expenses. Quietly. Without fanfare. Because he never asked. He just needed help. I never told Rachel. And now here she was stomping around like she still had some power. I called the lawyer. Told him Rachel had made a veiled threat about the will. He laughed, said, she must not remember who signs the paperwork. I asked him to freeze the trust. Put an official lock on any disbursements. Just in case. Then I sent one message to Rachel. The first contact in weeks. Don't even think about the trust. You'll get nothing from it. Not now. Not ever. Her response came 3 minutes later. You self-righteous b*****. You think you're better than everyone just because Grandma liked you more? You were always the favorite and you've never let anyone forget it. You just want to watch us suffer. I stared at the message for a long time, then blocked her number. The next day Thomas showed up at my front door. That was the surprise. I hadn't seen him in person in almost a year. He looked tired, limping, holding a grocery bag with something wrapped in a dish towel. He asked if he could come in. I let him. He sat at my kitchen table and slid the bag toward me. Inside was Grandma's sewing box, the one I thought was lost. It had her initials burned into the lid. He said he'd kept it safe all these years, even when Rachel told him to just donate it. Then he looked me straight in the eye and said, "Thank you for what you did for me. I never agreed with how they treated you. I just didn't know what to do about it." I asked him why he came now. He said, "Because you were right to stop. I just wish you hadn't had to." We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then he stood up, nodded, and left. No requests. No favors. Just quiet gratitude. I didn't expect that. And honestly, it meant more than I thought it would. But Rachel? She wasn't going to let it go. Not after the trust. Not after the car. And definitely not after her daughter got sent back to the same bedroom she'd once run away from. I could feel it. Something was brewing on her end. But she had no idea that the next storm wasn't coming from me. It was going to come for her, from the very people she'd spent years lying to. After Thomas left, I thought that might be the quiet before the end. He'd made his peace. He brought me something that actually meant something. And for a moment I allowed myself to believe maybe, just maybe, the storm had passed. I was wrong. It started again a week later like clockwork. I was at work when Jenna messaged me with just one line. "Rachel's trying to flip the narrative. Be ready." I didn't know what she meant until that weekend, when I showed up to Aunt Linda's birthday lunch. A casual family gathering, nothing big. But the moment I walked in I could feel it. People looking at me too long. Conversations dying the second I got near. That familiar feeling of being talked about behind closed doors. The same thing Rachel used to do in high school when she was mad at someone. Work the room before they arrived, paint the picture first, set the tone. She was already there, of course. sitting beside Haley, who was glued to her phone like usual. Rachel smiled wide when she saw me, the kind of smile that comes with teeth. "Emily," she said loudly, "glad you made it. We were just talking about generosity." I ignored her and walked to the kitchen. Throughout the day, little comments floated past me. Phrases like, "Family doesn't turn its back," "Some people let money change them," and "It's a shame what bitterness can do to someone." I stayed silent. Watched her spin the story like she was auditioning for a play. She told people I'd abandoned Haley, that I'd revoked rent without warning, that I'd jeopardized their transportation during a medical hardship. She made herself the tragic mother, the misunderstood one. Me. I was the cold aunt who suddenly turned on her own blood. Aunt Linda eventually pulled me aside and asked gently if everything was true. I didn't dodge. I told her everything. From the rent to the necklace. From the car to the trust. Her eyes widened. "She really broke Carol's necklace?" I nodded. Linda didn't say anything else, just shook her head like she'd suspected it but didn't want to believe it. Then came the final twist of that night, the part even Rachel didn't see coming. As everyone was getting ready to leave, Haley's phone rang. Loud. On speaker. She didn't even look at the screen before answering. "Hi, this is Michael from bank name, calling to discuss your recent application." She fumbled with the phone trying to turn it off, but it was too late. Everyone heard. Apparently, Haley had tried to open a line of credit in my name. She'd used my social, my email, even tried to fake my signature on a form. The only reason it didn't go through? I had a freeze on my credit after some identity theft years ago. There was silence. Everyone turned. And for the first time in my life, Rachel looked genuinely shocked. Not angry. Not smug. Just stunned. Haley stood up, shouted something about it being a mistake that she didn't know the bank would call right then. She left in a rush. Rachel followed, barely holding it together. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. That was the moment everything flipped. The relatives who'd been giving me side eyes all afternoon suddenly wanted to talk. They asked more questions. I answered them all, simply and honestly. I didn't need drama. Rachel had already written the script. All I did was let people see the ending. That night I got 3 apology texts. 2 from cousins. 1 from Aunt Linda. The truth was out now. Rachel couldn't spin it anymore. And Haley? She had just crossed into a whole new level of consequence. But the real ending, the real fight, hadn't happened yet. That was still coming. After the bank called disaster, Rachel went silent. Not a peep for 2 whole days. Not a text. Not a passive-aggressive message passed through Jenna. Nothing. Which honestly worried me more than her usual chaos. Rachel doesn't go quiet unless she's regrouping. On the 3rd day the explosion came. I was at home folding laundry when I heard the knock. Not a polite one. A full-on pounding like someone trying to break the door down. I didn't have to guess. I opened the door to find Rachel standing there, eyes wild, hair pulled back in a messy bun like she hadn't slept. Thomas was behind her, arms crossed, clearly forced into coming. And Haley? She was sitting in the car, staring down at her phone like the passenger seat was a courtroom bench. Rachel didn't even wait for me to speak. "How dare you humiliate us in front of our entire family? You couldn't just let it go, could you? You had to make a scene. You had to make everyone turn against us." I didn't react. I just stood there and let her throw the tantrum she'd probably rehearsed on the drive over. "You were always jealous," she said. "Of me. Of Haley. Grandma picked you to control the trust because she pitied you. Because you had nothing and she felt bad for you." That's when Thomas stepped forward. He said my name just once and handed me something. It was a folded letter. Handwritten. Bold. I opened it slowly, confused. It was in Grandma Carol's handwriting. I recognized the date immediately, 6 months before she passed. The letter was short. Simple. Just a few sentences. "Emily, if Rachel ever makes you feel guilty for saying no, read this again. You've done enough. You've always done more. Let the ones who take without thanks finally learn how to stand." I looked up at Thomas. He just nodded. Quiet again. Then turned back toward the car. Rachel was still ranting, barely registering what was happening. "You think you're better than us now? You think you're some kind of martyr? You cut us off over a necklace? That thing wasn't even real." I stepped outside finally. Walked right past her and down to the car. Haley looked up when I opened the passenger door. Her eyes were red, cheeks blotchy. She didn't say anything. I said one thing. "You tried to steal from me. That isn't immaturity. That's a crime." She didn't argue. He just looked away. Rachel stormed down after me. "She's just a kid. She's 21. That's still a kid to me. Then maybe it's time you stop treating her like one. She said a few more things I won't repeat. Some of it venom, some of it desperation, then pulled Haley out of the car and drove off, tires screeching like a scene out of a bad movie. I stood there for a minute, Grandma's letter still in my hand. And that was it. No calls came after that. No apologies. No redemption arc. Rachel never paid me back. Haley never said thank you. They didn't suddenly become better people. But they lost access. And for people like that, that's the deepest cut. They lost the house next, couldn't keep up with the mortgage. Moved into a rental an hour away. I heard Haley dropped out of school again. Started working part-time at a cafe. Not glamorous, but maybe the first real step she's ever taken without someone paying her way. Rachel still talks, I'm sure. Still tells people her version. But more and more people see through it. Because sometimes you don't need revenge. You just need the truth to breathe for long enough. And when it does, it cuts sharper than anything else. They skipped my 30th birthday because your brother needs the money for his car. I smiled, said nothing, and learned to drive myself out of their lives. Months later, I watched their golden son leave them drowning in debt. Turning 30 didn't scare me. What scared me was the feeling I had a few weeks before it. Like something heavy was coming and I couldn't quite name it yet. I grew up in a family where my brother Jake was the center of everything. It started small, extra slices of cake, staying up later than me, he's just a boy type stuff. But over time it evolved into something uglier. I was the responsible one. The helper. The one who didn't need attention because I had it all together. And Jake? He was the baby. Even when he turned 21, dropped out of school and crashed 2 cars, he was still their golden boy. And I was just reliable Monica. My husband Eric asked me in early March what I wanted to do for my 30th. I said I wanted to keep it small. Dinner, some laughs, maybe a fire pit at his parents' place. But what I really wanted, deep down, was to see my parents. I thought maybe they'll surprise me this year. Maybe they'll show up. Maybe this birthday they'll choose me. So I called my mom. I didn't ask for a gift. I didn't even ask for dinner. I just said I'd love to see them and maybe we could do cake or just spend the evening together. She said they wouldn't be able to make it. Not just her and Dad, none of them. Because, and I quote, Jake's car is acting up and we're helping him fix it this month. It's costing more than we thought. I sat on the edge of our bed after that call, holding the phone like it was going to offer more answers. I said, of course I understood. I didn't argue. I didn't guilt trip. I smiled, said it was okay and hung up. And I made a decision that night. I celebrated my birthday with Eric, our daughter Lila, 2 of my closest friends, and Eric's parents. There was pizza, a ridiculous unicorn cake, laughter that didn't feel forced, and a weird lightness I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I wasn't carrying the disappointment of being overlooked. I'd set it down. And the people around me saw it. They didn't say much, but I knew they knew. Eric especially. After the cake, when Lila had gone to bed and the wine had set in, I told them what happened. What they said, every one of them, was some version of, you don't have to keep doing this to yourself. Let them miss you. That night I finally started to listen. I didn't call my parents the next morning like I normally would. I didn't check in with Jake to see how the car was. I let the silence sit. Weeks went by and the silence remained. And then, things started to shift. It was subtle at first. A missed call here. A text about, hey, are you around? From my mom. I ignored them. Then the messages got more direct. Jake had spent $900 on some stupid LED light kit and then needed more money for tires. He'd maxed out their credit card. He was trying to trade in the car for something newer but didn't qualify. And then, a phone call I didn't answer but will never forget because she left a voicemail. Monica, we're a little overwhelmed right now. Could you talk to your brother? Maybe help him get on a better track? He listens to you. I laughed. Out loud. For the first time in years, the absurdity hit me. He listens to me? Since when? I didn't call back. They had spent so many years pretending I didn't need them that they actually believed it. And now, when the golden sun was driving them into chaos, they looked for the one person who always fixed things. But I had stopped fixing. I had started driving, in a direction they couldn't follow. It was almost 3 months after my birthday when they showed up. No call. No warning. Just a knock at the door on a Sunday afternoon while I was folding laundry and Eric was outside helping Lila paint the fence with water and a giant brush like it was the most important job on earth. I opened the door and saw both of them, my parents, standing there like they'd just dropped by on the way back from church. My mom had that tight smile she used whenever she wanted something but didn't want to admit it. My dad looked tired. Not just physically, he always looked tired, but defeated in a way that made me pause for a second before stepping back and letting them in. We sat down in the kitchen and I didn't offer coffee or snacks or anything. I just waited. My mom started with small talk. How was Lila? How was work? I answered in monosyllables until she dropped it. It was Jake. Apparently, Jake had borrowed money from a friend to try and flip a motorcycle he found online. It turned out the bike was stolen. The friend wanted his money back, $500, and Jake didn't have it. Neither did they because they were already paying off the tires, the credit card, and now some other mess he got into with overdue rent after getting kicked out of yet another apartment. They said very calmly that they thought maybe Eric and I could help. Just a loan. Just something to get them through this rough patch. I said no. That was it. One word. No justification. No anger. Just no. My mom blinked like she didn't hear me. My dad looked like he expected it. She started talking again about family, about how Jake was young and just needed support. I stopped her mid-sentence and asked if they remembered my 30th birthday. They both looked confused, like I was bringing up ancient history. I reminded them I didn't ask for anything except their time. I reminded them they said they were busy because of Jake's car. Then I said something I don't think I ever said to them before. I told them they made their choices and now I was making mine. They raised a son who never learned consequences, and they ignored the daughter who carried them all. I wasn't carrying them anymore. They didn't leave right away. My mom tried the guilt angle. My dad looked like he wanted to apologize but couldn't find the words. Eric came in halfway through the conversation, took one look at the scene and simply asked, "What's going on?" My mom turned to him, full of nerves and manipulation, and said something about how we should be helping Jake like family helps family. Eric, bless that man, just said, "You skipped your daughter's birthday for him. I think we're good here." They left not long after. After that, things got ugly. The messages became more desperate. Then came silence. And I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd figure it out. But of course that's not how this works. Because when someone is used to you carrying the weight, the moment you put it down they think you're the problem. Then came the most ridiculous request I've ever received. A week later my mom texted, "Jake needs stability. Maybe he could stay with you for a while. Just until he gets back on his feet." I didn't even reply. I just showed Eric the message. He laughed. Then said, "If he steps foot in this house, I'm calling the cops." We were done being the emergency exit for other people's poor decisions. But the story wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. Because Jake? He wasn't just irresponsible. He was getting reckless. And the next time I heard his name, it would be from a number I didn't recognize. It was a Tuesday morning and I was already in a weird mood. Lila had a meltdown about socks and I was late to everything. I had just sat down with coffee that had gone cold when my phone rang. Unknown number. I hovered over it for a second, almost ignored it, then picked up. The voice on the other end was calm, clipped, professional. "This is Officer Delaney with the County Sheriff's Department. Is this Monica Reynolds?" I said yes, and the next sentence felt like it dropped the floor out from under me. "We have your brother, Jacob Reynolds, in custody." He explained Jake had been arrested for multiple counts of theft, money, property, even identity fraud in one case. I didn't say anything. Just let the officer talk. He said they believed Jake had been stealing from people he knew, friends, roommates, even one of his exes, and pawning electronics, tools, and in one case jewelry that wasn't his to sell. And there was more. He'd been wiring money to online gambling platforms. He was in serious debt and had apparently started taking things just to cover his tracks. It wasn't petty. It was deliberate. Then came the part one half expected. "Would you be able to assist in any way? Bail, legal counsel, anything?" I said no. And when I hung up I didn't cry. I didn't even feel surprised. Just hollow. Like I was watching a movie I'd seen before and already knew how it ended. A few hours later my mom called. This time her voice cracked before she even finished saying hello. She didn't bother pretending it was a check-in. She got straight to the point. Jake was in jail and they needed help. Help with bail. Help with legal fees. Help with keeping him out of prison. "He's not a bad kid, Monica. He just got lost." I reminded her he wasn't a kid anymore. That he'd had more chances than most people ever get. That every time they bailed him out, figuratively or literally, he sank deeper. She said he just needed someone to guide him. I said, "Then maybe you should have done that 10 years ago." Then came the guilt. My dad got on the line trying to sound rational. He said if we all pulled together maybe this could be resolved quietly. That it would ruin Jake's life to have a felony on his record. He asked if Eric and I could maybe loan them a few thousand, just until they got through this. I told them I wasn't spending a single cent on Jake. I wasn't taking off work. I wasn't going to court. I wasn't doing anything. And I meant it. because for years they expected me to fix what Jake broke. I was the emotional glue, the financial backup plan, the emergency contact for disasters I didn't cause. And when I needed them, they were busy. With his car. Now he'd traded that car in for a jail cell and they were looking at me again. Like always. My mom said something I'll never forget. "How can you be so cold?" And I told her something I don't think she expected to hear. "You raised me to be this way. You made sure I knew I was on my own." Then I hung up. They didn't call back that day. But a week later they tried again. This time they weren't asking for money. They were asking for something even more absurd. My mom texted, "If you won't help with bail, maybe you could give a statement to the court about Jake's character? Just so they know he has a good sister." I stared at that message for 10 minutes. A good sister? Where was the good mother when I needed one? Where was the good father when I turned 30 and asked for nothing but their time? Eric saw the text and didn't say a word. He just shook his head and I could feel the heat rising in my chest. I didn't answer the message. 3 weeks later, Jake was sentenced. 2 years. Possibility of early release but no promises. He cried in the courtroom. So did my parents. They said he was misunderstood. That he had made mistakes but didn't deserve this. I sat in the back, arms crossed, saying nothing. Because the truth is, I had always been the one they turned to when everything else fell apart. But now I wasn't there to catch them. And for the first time in my life I didn't feel guilty about it. Jake had been gone for 7 months when the first lie reached me. Came from someone I barely knew anymore. A girl named Ashley who used to date him back in high school. She messaged me out of the blue on Facebook asking if it was true that I had pulled strings to keep Jake out of state prison and got him a lighter sentence. I read the message 3 times before answering. Well, I hadn't lifted a finger. I wasn't even in the courtroom when the sentence came down. Then 2 days later, an older woman from my parents' church group ran into me at the grocery store and said she was so proud of how I was keeping the family together. She told me my mom said I was covering Jake's lawyer fees and even helping my parents downsize into a smaller home. I walked away mid-sentence. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. They were rewriting history, making me the hero in a story I had no interest in being part of. Because to admit the truth, that they had ignored every warning sign, enabled every reckless move and then lost control of the son they built up like a golden calf, was too painful, too embarrassing. So they dragged my name into the fantasy instead. I didn't confront them. I didn't reply to the texts that started trickling in again, ones that carefully avoided Jake's name but were full of little questions like, "How's Lila?" and "We should visit soon." I knew what they were doing. They were testing the door to see if it was still unlocked. Then came the real moment. It was a Saturday morning when Eric walked into the kitchen holding his phone. He looked annoyed, confused, and a little amused. "They're here," he said. "Who's here?" "Your parents. They're in the driveway." I looked out the window and sure enough, there they were, standing beside their car with 2 large suitcases and that familiar expression that said we're desperate, but pretending everything is fine. I didn't move. Eric opened the door and stepped outside before I could say anything. I watched from the kitchen as he spoke to them. My mom gestured toward the house. My dad stood silently, eyes low. After a minute, Eric shook his head. She started raising her voice. He didn't flinch. Eventually he turned and walked back inside. "They thought they could stay here," he said. I sat down at the table. I don't know how long I stared at the wall. Maybe 2 minutes. Maybe 20. They weren't just visiting. They were trying to move in. Later, I found out they'd defaulted on one of the loans they took to pay off Jake's debts. They'd sold their car, refinanced their house twice, and were now facing foreclosure. They had nowhere else to go. And they just assumed, that I would catch them. It would have been so easy to let them in. I had the space. I had the money. I had the guilt. But I also had a husband who reminded me every day that I was not their doormat anymore. And a daughter who deserved to grow up in a house where love wasn't something you had to earn by solving everyone else's problems. That night after they left, I got a text from my mom. "I hope you never need help the way we need it now." I didn't answer. Then a few weeks later the letter came. It was in Jake's handwriting, which I hadn't seen in years. 6 pages. Rambling. Defensive. Apologetic. Angry. Circular. He said he knew he'd messed up, that prison was not what movies make it look like, and that he was reevaluating his whole life. But what stuck with me was the last page. "Mom and Dad said you could probably help get me out early. Talk to someone. Use your job. I know you always figure stuff out." There it was again. The assumption. The "of course Monica will fix it" mindset. Even from behind bars. I folded the letter, tucked it into a drawer and said nothing. Because the old me, the one who bailed them out, who said yes, who made excuses, was gone. And what they hadn't realized yet was that the new me could live with silence. But karma hadn't finished yet. Not even close. Because Jake's problems weren't over. And the next time my parents called, it wouldn't be about bail money or a place to stay. It would be something worse. Something they never saw coming. It was a cold Monday in December when my mom finally broke the silence. She left a voicemail, but her voice didn't sound like hers anymore. It was shaky, hollow, and barely above a whisper. "Monica, we need to talk. Something's happened with Jake." I didn't call back right away. I listened to it 3 times, then put the phone down and went about my day. Eric noticed. He always notices. I didn't say anything until Lila was asleep. She said something happened with Jake. I told him. Eric didn't ask me what I was going to do. He just said, "Do what's right. But don't set yourself on fire to keep them warm again." The next day I called her. She answered on the first ring. Jake had been caught in another scheme, inside prison. He'd convinced a few inmates to get involved in some kind of fake investment scam that targeted people on the outside. Using a smuggled phone, he'd been messaging women pretending to be someone else, promising fake returns on cryptocurrency investments. One of the women traced it back, contacted the facility, and now Jake was facing new charges: fraud, wire deception, and theft. He was going to be transferred. He'd likely face an extended sentence. This time it wasn't just jail. It was prison. Real time. Real consequences. And my parents? They were spiraling. My dad had started drinking again. My mom had apparently started selling off her jewelry to pay for consultations with private attorneys. Attorneys who wouldn't even take the case. "We don't know what to do," she said. "You stop pretending he's a victim," I answered. She didn't like that. Then she asked the question I'd been waiting for. Not about money, not about lawyers. Something even more insane. "Can you talk to him? Maybe he'll listen to you now." I almost laughed. After everything, she still believed I was the one holding the magic switch that could fix Jake. But here's the thing. I agreed. Not for them. Not for Jake. For me. I drove out to the facility a week later. It was 3 hours, not including the security processing. I didn't tell my parents I was going. Eric didn't ask questions, just packed me snacks and told me to be careful. Jake looked older. He wasn't wearing the smug grin he used to wear like armor. There was a slump in his shoulders I'd never seen before. He looked up and said, "I knew you'd come." I didn't say anything at first. I just sat across from him and waited. He told me he didn't think things would get this bad. That he was just trying to make money. That he never meant to hurt anyone. I asked him why he kept doing the same thing expecting different results. He shrugged. Said something about pressure. Expectations. Fear. Then he said, "I thought Mom said you'd help." And I told him the truth. I told him no one was coming to save him. That Mom and Dad couldn't even keep a roof over their heads anymore. That he had finally run out of shortcuts and excuses. Then I said something I didn't even plan on. "I'm not mad at you anymore. But I'm done with you. You need to figure out who you are without breaking everyone else to get there." He nodded. Not like he agreed, just like he heard me. I left the visitation room and never looked back. A few months later he was officially sentenced to 2 more years. No parole. No appeal. 2 full years for fraud and theft. My parents stopped updating me after that. I think they finally realized the only person who had ever held the family together wasn't interested in doing it anymore. But the strangest thing happened in the silence that followed. They changed. I didn't believe it at first. But what came next? I never saw coming. It was spring when I saw them again. The trees were just starting to bloom and Lila had begged to go to the park near the river. We were sitting on a bench, sharing a bag of pretzels when I looked up and saw 2 people standing near the entrance. My parents. I froze. They didn't wave or call out. They just stood there for a second, unsure if they should come closer. Lila saw them and waved before I could say anything. And slowly they made their way over. They looked smaller. Not physically, but in that way people look when life has drained them of pride. My dad's coat was too big for him, and my mom's hands were trembling slightly as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. They sat down on the opposite end of the bench. My mom was the first to speak. "We didn't come to ask for anything." That alone made me listen. She told me they had moved into a tiny rental an hour away. That they'd sold nearly everything they had to pay off what they could. That they were in debt so deep they'd probably never climb out of it. And then she said something I wasn't ready for. "We failed you. And we failed him." I didn't say anything. My dad looked at Lila and said he was sorry for not being around more. Not just for her, but for me. He admitted they had placed Jake on a pedestal so high they couldn't see anyone else. Especially me. "We always thought you didn't need us. Because you never messed up. You never asked for anything." I said finally. I stopped asking because I learned the answer. We sat in silence for a while. Lila ran off to the swings. My mom watched, her eyes glassy. She turned back and said they'd started going to a local church group. Not because they were trying to fix things through religion, but because it was the first place that didn't know who they used to be. They were learning to live with what they'd done. Not erase it. Not explain it away. Just live with it. Then my mom asked quietly, could we be part of her life again? Not all at once. Just, maybe start over. It wasn't the groveling apology some people might imagine or hope for. It wasn't dramatic. But it was the first time in my life they looked at me and didn't expect something in return. And that meant something. I told them they could visit. That we'd take it slow. That I wasn't promising anything permanent, but I was willing to see if something real could be built. Over the next few months they came by once or twice a week. Nothing big. Just an hour here, a quick lunch there. My mom brought over cookies she'd made from a recipe she used to make when I was a kid. My dad helped Eric repair a leaky pipe. They started trying. And I didn't stop them. Then surprisingly Jake started writing again. Not asking for help. Just, writing. Honest letters. Apologizing. Telling stories about what he was doing inside. Books he was reading, how he'd started helping in the kitchen, how he finally got sober. He never asked for money. Never asked for anything actually. And that's what made the letters feel different. Like maybe, for once he was growing up the hard way. But growing up all the same. By the time Jake hit the 1-year mark, my parents had changed enough that even Eric stopped rolling his eyes when they visited. Lila started calling them grandma and grandpa again. Slowly the edges softened. There's no perfect bow on this story. My parents are still rebuilding and Jake still has a long road ahead of him. But the truth is I'm not angry anymore. I've learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about deciding to stop letting other people's mistakes define you. And for the first time in my life I don't feel like the forgotten daughter. I feel like someone they finally saw. And that's a start. It's strange how life gets quiet when the noise you're used to finally dies down. 6 months after Jake was sentenced again, everything around me started to settle. The tension that used to hum beneath everything, every dinner, every phone call, every holiday just stopped. Not overnight, but gradually. Like dust finally starting to settle in a room that had been shaking for years. My parents still live in the tiny 2-bedroom rental an hour away. It's not the house I grew up in. That place is long gone. Foreclosed, sold, stripped down. But they keep this one clean. Tidy. They budget. They cook. They even argue less. They come over sometimes but they never assume. They ask first. They don't show up with bags anymore or expect to be fed or entertained. They bring snacks for Lila, help clean up, and then they go home. It's not warm and fuzzy. Not like a Hallmark movie. But it's real. And that's worth more than any apology they could have fumbled through. My mom calls once a week now. Sometimes she tells me about the older woman next door who feeds the stray cats. Other times she just asks what Lila's into these days. She listens when I talk, and for the first time in my life she doesn't turn the conversation back to Jake. That shift. It's something I still catch myself questioning. Like I'm waiting for them to slip. But 6 months later they haven't. They've stopped pretending Jake's issues were anyone else's fault. My dad especially has changed the most. He used to go quiet when things got hard. Checked out, disappeared behind his silence. But now he talks. Slowly, simply. He even told me once that I was right to walk away. You were the only one thinking clearly, he said. I just wasn't ready to hear it. Jake writes every few weeks. The first few letters felt stiff, like he didn't know how to be honest yet. But they've gotten better. More grounded. Less excuses. He told me he finally got his GED and started helping other inmates in the library. He's still facing time, but he said it's the first time he's actually stopped long enough to figure out who he is without pretending. In his last letter he wrote something that stuck with me. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I hope someday you'll believe I meant it when I say I was proud to be your brother even when I was a mess. I haven't written back yet. I'm not ready. But I haven't thrown the letters away either. Eric's been steady through all of it. I think he's relieved more than anything. Not just that my parents have changed, but that I finally gave myself permission to stop fixing everything. He told me recently, you were surviving for so long, you didn't even know what peace felt like. He was right. I started doing little things I used to love but had let go of. Reading late at night. Sketching. Playing music while cooking with Lila. I joined a book club. I stopped checking my phone every time it buzzed, afraid it was another crisis. I live slower now. More intentionally. Lila doesn't know everything. One day she might. But for now, she just knows that her grandparents visit sometimes and her uncle is away for a while. She doesn't ask too many questions. Kids sense when things are complicated, but they don't always need the details. The truth is, we're not the same family we were a year ago. And thank God for that. We're scarred but not broken. Humbled but still here. And maybe that's all any of us can hope for after years of pretending things were okay when they weren't. So when my mom hugs me now, I don't flinch. When my dad thanks me for dinner, I don't brush it off. And when I look at my life, This quiet, rebuilt, imperfect life. I don't feel bitterness anymore. I feel something closer to freedom. And that's more than I ever thought I'd get.